Let's talk about disruption. What industries do you think can be disrupted by the advancements in fintech? And perhaps what sectors do you think are immune?
Yeah, so I think, I always find the word disrupt to be a little aggressive. I think in with all things with money and finance, the point isn't to turn things upside down. It's more about shifting the paradigm to unlock new value for all players in that space. And so when I think about that, some of the industries that I think are going to that have the biggest opportunities for changing the paradigm and unlocking new value is around construction, transportation and logistics, and home services. And so like specifically, like when we look at construction today and we're talking to folks, one problem that we keep seeing these platforms running into is that if their customer is a general contractor, today that general contractor is usually issuing payments to subcontractors in the form of checks. This is a bit of just what's expected and normal in the industry, but also a result of the lack of like technology solutions to make it easier to facilitate digital payments. So when a GC is issuing a check to a sub, there's a variety of issues that end up showing up here. Number one, it's slow and manual. They have to go in and either print these checks and sign them manually, or in some cases, write them out. And then when you're issuing checks to folks, you're not in control of when they're actually going to cash that check. And so until that check is cashed, you have to ensure that there's enough cash in the account for you to maintain cash flow until that check is deposited. And then as a result of this, the reconciliation around the payment is also very painful because it's usually the information sitting in a checkbook, in a manually printed checkbook that you then need to go and add to another system. Now, in moving to digital payments, and if we think about that same payment flow, subs can now be paid faster when they're paid digitally. The general contractor is better able to manage their cash flow with near real-time payments, and reconciliation is also much easier as a result. And so as we look at B2B platforms, that are in this kind of space, they have the opportunity to offer more tailored financial services when everyone is starting to move through a digital payment workflow in an industry that we believe has been historically underserved. And so that's, I think, one area that we're super excited about. Now, when we think about sectors that are a little bit more immune to technology, the sort of, elephant in the room is the real estate industry. And just kind of, historically, it's the kind of industry that is fairly risk averse. It's always about like, control and doing things the way that they're done so you don't rock the boat. And there we see a ton of payments still happening in checks, manual payments, lots of back and forth between, a landlord and their property management teams as an example. And I think we're still in the early days of digitizing that. We're starting to see players kind of pop up around the country that are going to tackle this, but it's still really early days and a bit of an uphill battle.
Well, why? Why is this sector seemingly immune to technology?
So the thing is, real estate itself is a primarily relationship-driven industry. And I think that even kind of extends out to banking and financial services. So like most landlords end up knowing their banker, right? And there's a really rich relationship and history between the bank and that landlord themselves. And so unless you're working with a bank that's like super technology first, which generally isn't the case when you're thinking about real estate, you're going to end up with a lot of like the old school way of doing things. I also think just the average age of a professional in real estate tends to lean a little bit older, where people are used to kind of doing things the way that they're always done. We're now starting to see that transition where the decision makers and folks who are ultimately responsible for the financial sort of health of these businesses are now starting to skew to more millennials or digital first types of professionals, but it's still really early days, right? Like if you've got someone who's been in the real estate industry since the 70s, they've been cutting checks to their team, they have like rich relationships with all their vendors, and they know everyone and have a relationship with everyone around their business. It's a much harder sell to tell them to go digital because they don't see the value in it. They're like, I could pay my contractor digitally, but I know that they're going to come in every week and ask for their check. And my secretary knows that like, this is the day the check needs to be ready. Plus I get an excuse to be able to have some FaceTime with them. And so there's less of a perceived problem for these types of players.